Welcome to Mentoring Mondays, April 12th. I'm Charlie Pecchio, and in 2008, I founded Kingston Capital. We focus on small to medium-sized businesses that are involved with surveying, engineering, architecture, construction, geospatial, and technology. And we help these businesses to succeed by providing them with consulting, training, management, strategic planning, capital, and ownership transition. Thank you so much for being here. We really hope that you get the most you can out of this session and enjoy our time together. Session's got lots of information. For some of you, the information in this session will be too much. For some of you, the information in this session will be too little. For some, it'll be just right. Participants in previous sessions that I've done say that they like my stories. Hopefully you will too. There will be a few or several. And they like the fact that the slides are very detailed for later use. It allows me to move quickly and skim over some slides to save time. You know, the detailed slides will be provided to you and the recording will be available so you won't have to remember it all, because we don't have hyperthymesia. That's a highly superior autobiographical memory. And you know who has that? Mary Lou Henner. You remember her from Taxi? She and about 24 other people in the world can remember every single moment of their lives. So, but when you actually look at something and you hear it at the same time, you're much better off at remembering it. The URLs for the videos are included in the slides so you can access them later. There will be stories from my experience, as I mentioned earlier. They're based on real events. Some of the names have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty. So please make note of items that are important to you. Make comments and ask questions at any time, or write them down and ask them later if they're not answered during the session. And you can email me at kingstoncapitalcorp.com. Please turn off your cell phone ringer and mute your microphone when you are not speaking. So right now, I'm going to do a little switcheroo. If you'll just give me a second. Because okay. All right. So if you have turned off your cell phone ringer, you now can enjoy this overview of many topics, but remember, it's not intended to provide legal, accounting, or tax advice. You know where to go to get that. So, if you're a business owner, you've probably worked really hard for many years to build your business. Don't you want to be rewarded properly for all your hard work? Don't you want those that you care about to be taken care of? I'm sure you do. Don't you want to be the one who determines the plan for the rest of your life? First story, where there's a will. Once upon a time, there was a business owner named Doug who had spent many years building a successful business with the help of his team. He was always telling his team that he was working on an ownership transition plan that would take care of them in the future. They were anxiously awaiting it, and they asked about it from time to time. After a few years, he finally put the plan down on paper, and he said, "Hey guys, I put it down on paper," but he didn't communicate the details to them yet. More years passed, his team grew weary of waiting. Finally, somebody said, "Hey Doug, what if something unforeseen happens to you?" So Doug created a will that would take care of his team if something happened to him, and he told the team not to worry, he had a will. A year later, he still had not signed the will. Do you want to guess what happened next? That's right, Doug passed away. Let's talk about ownership transition. Ownership transition is the transfer of equity ownership in a business through a sale, a gift, or inheritance. Unfortunately, OT may be forced to occur due to the death or disability of the owner. It can be a process of a few months or many years. Optimal owner transition will result through defining goals, identifying the best approach, creating a plan, and then executing the plan, utilizing the proper professional assistance. But wait a minute. Before we go any further, you may be asking yourself, who is this guy and what gives him the right to talk to me about ownership transition? Well, I was born at a very early age in a log cabin that I helped my father build. I had to walk several miles to school each day, uphill both ways. Actually, I was born in the South Bronx at the beginning of the baby boom and rode New York City buses to school. My dad always worked 2 or 3 jobs to keep food on the table and clothes on our backs. He serviced cigarette machines, drove a taxi cab, and shot pool one-handed. And I don't know which one of those made him the most money, but I do know one time he ran 47 balls one-handed. I worked my way through Fordham Prep in college, which was funded by an academic scholarship in my first 2 businesses. My first business was a pistachio machines route. I had about 30 penny and nickel machines with the red pistachios. And then I got the concession at my high school for the quarter pool tables and the Pepsi machines. I also worked full-time while going to college nights and weekends. I worked on Wall Street and was at IBM in finance and then in marketing. 1976, started 2 companies. Within 5 years, I sold them, and I've done many more. For 8 years, I was president of a Swiss venture capital company, and I've served as officer and director of many private and public companies in the US, the UK, France, Germany, and Switzerland. I've got 40 plus years of deal making, including 3001 Inc., which grew from a 3-person survey company in Sulphur, Louisiana, to a geospatial company in the Beltway in Washington, DC. As CEO and later vice president, I led the recapitalization and expansion of the company to over 300 employees through organic growth and 5 acquisitions prior to its sale to Northrop Grumman in 2008 for $105 million. Here's a little story. It's how it all began, the Hondos. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Charlie in the South Bronx. I was nonviolent, believed in brain over brawn. At age 13, I was the top student in the honors program at Henry J. Bruckner Junior High School, Public School 101. One day, the Hondos, they were a local youth gang, they were preparing for a war with a neighboring gang called the Counts, primarily over Buffano Park, which is a concrete playground with a few trees. I met with Richie, the leader of the Hondos, to discuss Richie's concerns. He was really worried that they would lose the war, and he also wanted to keep the gang going. He respected me, asked me for my help. So what I did is I met with the leadership of the 2 gangs, and I said, why don't you guys just paint a line down the middle of the park with the north under control of the Counts and the south under the Hondos. I said, also, you can form an alliance and agree not to fight each other. And you could band together against any gang that threatened either of you. To ensure their legacies, they also set up a leadership succession program. Of course, that's not what they called it. But they never fought each other. And for 10 years, they considered to live in peace. But let's talk about planning for ownership transition. Step 1 is define ownership's goals. Step 2 is optimize the company. Step 3 is identify the best approach and create a plan. Step 4, execute the plan utilizing the proper professional assistance. Step 1, define ownership goals. Your goals are going to change over time, but you have to start thinking about them well before the transition. Are there individuals or groups you want to take care of? Family members, employees, clients, a charity, anybody else? What promises and commitments have you made to them? Have you done the proper tax planning to minimize taxes? In 2021, the annual gift exclusion per recipient is $15,000. That's $30,000 per couple. Have you taken advantage of that? Also, there's no tax on paying someone else's tuition or medical costs or giving gifts to your spouse. In 2021, the estate tax has an exemption of $11.7 million, $23.4 million per couple. This death tax, started under Abraham Lincoln in 1864. The overages tax is 40% right now. In 1999, the exemption was $650,000 and 55% tax rate after that. Of course, this expires at the end of 2025, but based on recent events, it looks like it'll probably decrease before that. Now, some states have an inheritance and or estate taxes too. This is an article from Forbes. They say this is where not to die in 2021. The blue states have a state tax. The purple has both an estate tax and an inheritance tax, and the red have an inheritance tax. As Yogi Berra said, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. And I'm not going to predict what's going to happen. Oh, wait, yes, I will. Taxes are going to go up. Should you set up a trust? What are the advantages of a trust? Trust will put conditions on how and when your assets are distributed after you die. You can reduce the estate and gift taxes. You can distribute your assets to your heirs efficiently without the cost, delay, and publicity of probate. And that can cost you 3 to 7% or more of your estate. You can better protect your estate and assets from creditors and lawsuits. You can name a successor trustee who not only manages your trust after you die, but also is empowered to manage the trust estates if something unforeseen happens to you and you can't manage your own estate, rather your own trust. There are many types of trusts. There's a credit shelter trust, which is also called a bypass or family trust. You can will up to the estate exemption to the trust and pass the rest tax-free. There's a generation skipping trust, also called a dynasty trust. You can go up to the estate exemption, typically for your grandchildren. There's a qualified personal residence trust. Did you know that you can remove your residence or even a vacation home from your estate and not have them subject to estate taxes? There's an irrevocable life insurance trust. Remove your life insurance from your taxable estate. There's a qualified terminable interest property trust. You can direct your assets to particular relatives. Now, this is subject to estate tax, but you can make sure that the person you want to get a certain asset will get that asset. There's a spousal lifetime asset trust, a SLAT. This is an irrevocable trust that one spouse establishes for the other. The assets are not taxable in either spouse's estate, and they're not available to either spouse's creditors. And the beneficiaries may also receive distributions of income and or principal from the SLAT. That's a pretty good one. And then there's the mother-in-law trust. I really like this one. You give your mother-in-law or another older relative a general power of appointment over an irrevocable trust for your spouse and descendants. You fund that trust with low basis assets. Let's say you bought some stock a long time ago or some property and you have a really low basis in it. You put that into the trust. Then when your mother-in-law dies, the assets in the trust get a step up. They're now includable in your mother-in-law's estate, but since she wasn't rich enough to use her whole exemption, you've avoided capital gains tax because the step up went to your mother-in-law. There are IRS-tested advanced estate freeze strategies like GRATs and installment sales to grantor trusts. You can actually give away the upside of assets transferred to the trust tax-free. There are many, many more. Trust lawyers are now busy concocting ways to exploit the new tax for qualified business income. Although setting up a trust is relatively simple, there are many types of trusts and lots of rules, and they keep changing. So please have a professional advise you. What does a successful transition of ownership mean to you personally? Is the continuation of your legacy important to you? Do you want the business to go on? Would you like to retain some ownership in your business after its sale? Do you want to continue to remain involved in some capacity? If so, for how long? What kind of compensation, if any, do you need after ownership transition? What about perks and benefits that you now receive from the business, which you might have to pay for after you transfer ownership? When do you want OT to start and end? You need to answer all these questions in writing before you can create a plan. Step 2 is optimize the business. What's your business worth today? Have you had a professional appraisal done recently? Have you and your accountant done valuations using several methods? What's EBITDA? It's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. This is a key metric, but it's not the only factor in determining value. There are adjustments that are made. This is called recasting, where you actually will take non-recurring income and expenses, non-operating income and expenses, and seller's discretionary expenses and adjust your financials using those. What are seller's discretionary expenses? This is owner compensation and benefits versus the market value in a typical scenario. Meaning that if you're paying yourself $200,000 and the owner compensation for a comparable business is $100,000, that extra $100,000 would be considered SDE. Charitable contributions. A business doesn't have to make those, but you may be doing that. Certain travel and living expenses, if you're taking family on trips. Other expenses that a new owner would or would not have, you adjust for those. Here's a suggestion. Consider moving all of your seller's discretionary expenses to a separate limited liability company that then in turn owns the business and charges a management fee to the business. So when it comes ownership transition time, you have segregated all of the SDE, and the business financial statements will truly reflect the operation of the business. If the business is an S corporation, that LLC that you set up has to have a single owner. What valuation do you want for your business? Here are some factors affecting the valuation of surveying companies. Do people outside of the AEC industry understand and appreciate the surveying business? Have those of us in the surveying business done a good job of communicating the benefits of what we do and the worth of our companies? Is it difficult to recruit, hire, train, motivate, and retain good employees? Surveyors are underappreciated and undervalued, as are their companies. Hang on a second, I lost the video.
This is great stuff so far. I love it.
So we're seeing your PowerPoint.
Yeah, he's trying to find
edit mode right now, just so you know.
Yeah.
He's trying to do he had a YouTube link in there, so he's trying to play a video.
Yeah, I am trying to play a video and
might have to.
I think as surveyors, we're the biggest part of being undervalued and underappreciated. Just my thoughts.
Yeah,
yep.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Jesse, we'll have, I'll throw it in the Dropbox when we're done. Yes, sir. Charles is going to email it when he's done with today's presentation. So
I am.
Yep.
Okay, here we are. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine. It's a relaxed setting. You're good.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
I need to have my property surveyed because my neighbor is encroaching on my land. He is a jerk.
I will survey your land, but I will need some more information before I start.
Okay. But before you start, I need to know how much it will cost. My real estate agent said it will only cost $100 for a survey.
There are many variables which determine how much the survey will cost. I can give you a ballpark estimate after you give me some information about your property.
Well, my realtor is a friend of mine, and he said it would only cost $100. Besides, he already showed me where the corners are. He put a rock at the property corner and told me it is the corner, so it will be easy for you to survey my land.
I appreciate your relationship with your realtor, but he is not a land surveyor, licensed by the state to practice land surveying. How do you know your neighbor is encroaching if you have not yet had a land survey?
I know he's encroaching because I looked at it on Google Maps. Google Maps shows my property line. That is where my realtor put the rock. Now my neighbor has moved the rock and he parks his car where the rock was. He is a jerk, and I need you to tell him it is my property.
The boundary lines on Google Maps are not accurate. You need a proper survey to tell you if there is really an encroachment or not.
Well, okay. But I still do not think it should cost several $100s. Do you use GPS?
Yes, we use Trimble GPS.
Well then, bring your GPS to my property and it will tell you where the corner is. It should only take 1 hour. I have GPS too. I got GPS coordinates from Google Earth and put the rock back. Then my neighbor stole the rock. He is a jerkface.
Your GPS unit is not survey grade. It is not accurate. And the coordinates you used are erroneous. This is grossly inaccurate. I will give you a proper survey.
Well, okay. But I will only pay you $500. It will be an easy survey, I promise. Can you come to my property now and set my corners?
First, I need to do some research on your property. Do you have a legal description of your property?
Yes, here is my assessor's parcel map. It shows all my property lines. Now that your research is done, can you go set my corner now?
No. I will need to see your deed to verify the proper lot dimensions and controlling elements. The assessor's map is not a proper survey map.
I can tell that you are not a people person. I will come back when someone else is here who will be more helpful. In the meantime, I am going to build a fence where the rock was, since I already know it was in the right place. Goodbye.
Well, that entire video shows how little people know about surveying and what their expectations are. And that's one of the reasons why our businesses are undervalued, because they really don't know the value of what we do and how much work goes into creating a survey.
Yes, of course.
So what valuation do you want for your business? What's your target valuation? What's the minimum you accept? What do you need to do to optimize the business value between now and ownership transition? You have to close the gap between the current value and your target value at OT. Do your attorney and CPA have the expertise and experience needed for successful OT? Do you need to strengthen your company identity or perform rebranding? For example, our surveying company that was named Vernon F. Meyer and Associates became 3001, the geospatial company. Of course, it got that name long before it was the geospatial company. How do you optimize awareness of your company and its perceived image in the marketplace? Are your policies and procedures documented well? Should you get ISO or other certifications? Should you expand your offerings? But remember, don't lose focus on what you do well. Should you invest your profits, reinvest your profits, or seek further capitalization or a recap of the company by selling off a part of the company to somebody? Should you merge or make key acquisitions? Have you identified potential buyers and established relationships? You should work together first with a company, and that might actually evolve into an OT transaction in the future, and they will acquire you because you know each other and they know that they can trust you, and at some point they might buy you. Let's look at some business valuation approaches, because I know you all want to know what your business is worth. You may think you do. The income approach. Income approach methods determine the value of the business based on its ability to generate cash flow, the desired economic benefit for the owner. And the economic benefit, such as the seller's discretionary cash flow or net cash flow, is capitalized, discounted, or multiplied by a factor, and that creates a valuation. The key to the effective use of this approach is the proper selection of the capitalization rate, the discount rate, and valuation multiples. And these are based on what industry standards are. The well-known methods under this approach are the discounted cash flow method, capitalization of earnings method, multiple seller's discretionary cash flow method. If your eyes aren't glazing over yet, stay with me. Seller's discretionary cash flow can be determined as follows. You start with the business pre-tax earnings, you add non-operating expenses and subtract non-operating income, you add unusual or one-time expenses, you subtract non-recurring income, you add depreciation and amortization expenses, you add interest expense and subtract interest income, then you adjust the compensation of the business owners, as we were talking about earlier, to market compensation. Then you use the industry multiplier to estimate the value. The market approach, that actually uses comparison to historic sales involving similar businesses. And usually you look at sales prices and financial information of businesses that closely resemble your business, and you calculate multiples that are used then to estimate your business value. There's also public company information that's out there that you can use to establish a basis and then adjust for the size of your business. What's the industry multiplier? Well, there are published multipliers that folks have used to create a value for a business. and they take each item on your balance sheet or income statement and they multiply it times this multiplier. Our NAICS code is 541370. That's surveying mapping services. So here's an example. What was your last year's sales times the multiplier? $1 million in sales last year times a 0.5 multiplier. That's a quick and dirty $500,000 value. Here are several examples of multipliers for various aspects of your business. First one is the gross revenue, the second one's net sales, then gross profit, net income. You see about in the middle, EBITDA. EBITDA, in this case, they're using a multiple of 4, which gives this business that does $1 million in revenue and has $100,000 in EBITDA, a business value of $400,000. The seller's discretionary cash flow is $150,000 and it uses a multiplier of 3 to come up with a value of $450,000. When you average all of these, you'll see the average is $479,600. But just for fun, do a quick estimate of the value of your business. What's your annual gross revenue divided by 2? What's your EBITDA? I know you know that right off the top of your head, multiplied by 4. Well, you can do that later. Are you happy with those numbers? Of course, it's not that simple. There are many other factors involved. When you're optimizing the business and its value, first get your financial house in order. Clean up your balance sheet and handle those sellers' discretionary earnings, or expenses rather. Then work on the other factors. Personnel. What's the business culture? Do your people have a passion for what they do? All right, let's see if we can get this one to play. How about we watch it on YouTube? Think that might work?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a part of your mic. Usually it grabs the computer speakers, but we'll try it. Hit play and then we'll see if it works. If not, then hit pause.
Is that working?
No,
No?
it's not playing yet either. So,
Hey Trent, this is Rob.
Yep.
On under share screen, and there's share computer sound in the lower left corner.
Ah,
So
okay.
that might be an option.
All right. Let me go there and see. Where are the meeting controls?
Bottom center of your screen.
No, they're not there.
yeah, I don't. Mine doesn't have that computer option either.
These are really good. I'm sorry we can't play them.
Oh, you're okay. You're all right. We'll figure it out. Are you using a regular microphone or just your computer laptop?
My computer laptop.
Huh. Yeah, I wonder why the audio doesn't come through.
I don't know. Let's see. Share computer sound.
There you go.
There we go. All right,
Ready.
let's try that. Can you hear it?
Yeah, it's working.
You're making a sound. Don't think of writing it down. If the word gets out, you're gonna go to jail. We got things to say. Don't take our words away. Transparency, it's our right to see your games. You got aeroplanes, blue light brigade for a family name. Bring the Air Force in, there's gonna be a fire. We wanna know who paid who passed the message through. jumbo jets, friends with benefits. Sing with me this melody. Oh, ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time for that. When driving to work, it takes its toll. Spend your paycheck driving home. Please, Jay-Z, out my salary for a ride. Split up 2 days drilling holes. Backstage, you little moles. Justin B ain't as rich as me. Everyone at FMB say, ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time for that. Rewind the times that were violent, how we stood and fought through the silence. Consumption, corruption, confined in a nation we fought to survive in. How can we survive when we pay more for mileage from mansions and coastlines that boast our retirement? So what's next? Does Robert Duck have to put it in context? Time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time for that.
That's a good one. I like that one.
Now, do those people have a passion for what they do?
Absolutely.
Okay. And the point is that we need to do that. We need to have a passion. And everybody in your organization needs to be passionate. Because when somebody comes in to look at your business and they're interested in buying it, that's going to come across. What's your talent level? What's the average age of your staff and what professional licenses are held? What's the tenure of your staff members? Are they motivated? How are they compensated? Is it comparable to the industry or lower or higher? What about benefits, health insurance, retirement plan, tuition, PTO? What other benefits do you provide them? Do you have an employee succession or replacement planning? Do you have a management succession plan? Training. Have you tailored a training plan for each employee? You should have. Technical training, sales training, management training. Remember, 90% of employee development occurs on the job, and it's our responsibility to develop every single employee. You may say, well, we don't have the time to do that. Well, you know what? It does pay off. They get better and better at what they do. And when it comes time to actually transition ownership of the business, there's value in that. What kind of communication and reporting systems do you have? Do you have daily reports, weekly reports? The companies I'm involved with have a weekly report that has accomplishments for the past week, goals for the coming week, and then any comments, concerns, obstacles, and opportunities listed in there. And we tell the employees that you can't get fired for anything you say in there. Tell us what's going on. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Do you have regular conference calls and meetings, and are they concise and goal-oriented, or are they just a waste of time? Do you actually have employee meetings and social events? Do you get up in front of the group and share your vision? Do you recognize and reward performance? Do you offer equity participation? There are various approaches to achieving this, and we're going to look at a few of them. A lot of people have heard of an ESOP. What's that all about? It's actually a retirement plan in which the company contributes its stock or money to buy its stock to the plan. The company contributions typically are tax deductible. They're not taxable to the employee. The stock is not actually owned by the employee while still employed. Now, they can buy the stock from the owners who would have capital gains. So here's a way to sell your company to your employees over time, have the company fund it, where the profits of the company are going into the ESOP and they're not taxable. And then you get paid for your stock and you have capital gains on it instead of ordinary income. In S corporations, the percentage of ownership held by the ESOP is not subject to federal income tax and usually state tax. And there's no income tax at all on the profits of an S corporation that's wholly owned by an ESOP. Did you know that? Let's look at other equity participation. Stock options. This is where you can purchase at a fixed price sometime in the future. You have qualified incentive stock options, or ISOs, and this can only be granted to employees, but it may qualify for capital gains tax treatment, whereas non-qualified options can be granted to anyone and they are not capital gains. They're subject to ordinary income tax, but you could give that to anybody. And remember, these are options. So they don't actually have ownership in the company until sometime in the future if they exercise the option. And here's one that's become popular recently. It's called tracking stock or phantom stock. This is where the employees do not actually own the stock ever. They vest over time in the value of the stock and or the appreciation in value. So it's really a bonus plan, and it's an obligation of the company that can be funded over time. It doesn't have to be funded over time. It can be just funded when it's due, but it can be funded over time. And then it's subject to ordinary income tax when the money is received at full vesting or retirement by the employee. If they want to defer it to retirement, they have to opt that 1 year before it's fully vested. But then they don't have to actually take the money until retirement. Okay, let's talk about that for one more minute. So here's a way that an employee that you want to maybe recruit, maybe you want to recruit a vice president, and that person's expecting some form of equity or ownership, but you don't really want that person to have ownership. You don't want that person to have access to certain financial records. Whatever the reason, you can actually give that person tracking stock. And so you would award some tracking stock, and let's say you award that person 100 shares of tracking stock at $1,000 a share for a value of $100,000. They don't actually get that. But what they get is they get an account that says that they now have $100,000 in tracking stock. And then you can either have them vest in that $100,000 over some period of time, several years, or you can have them vest only in the appreciation on that value. So like if today it's worth $1,000 a share, and when it vests in 5 years or 8 years or whatever your vesting period is, it's worth $200,000 a share, they would only get the appreciation. So here's a way to actually have them have a stake in the company, yet you don't actually have to come up with any money. They don't have to come up with any money, and over time, they'll get vested. And if they leave, they only get the portion that's vested, and they get that portion at the end of the period or upon retirement. They don't get it when they leave the company. Optimizing the business and its value, the best way to do that would be to set up the business to operate without ownership participation in operations. Ownership should work on the business, not in the business at some point. And if you can't get there now, you need to have a plan for getting there. The most valuable businesses at ownership transition are those where you're no longer required as the owner. Now let's look at recruiting, hiring, and retaining employees. We know that's a challenge. Where might you find employees that have the qualities that you want? Hopefully this one will work.
Should be good.
Okay. I'm going to show as an example Operation Palmetto Employment from South Carolina. Many states have programs like this. And I'm not going to read all this to you, but it'll be in the slides when you get them, okay? They're trying to be the premier state in terms of being military friendly. And you can get information if you happen to be in South Carolina. But what you need to do is consider hiring veterans. It's a win-win. They bring with them soft skills like time management and leadership, technical skills that they've learned in their military job. And then there are programs that give you business tax credits and actually repayment of some of their wages. There's a work opportunity tax credit up to $9,600 per year for each qualified employee. There's OJT and apprenticeship programs where you get wage assistance. There's vocational rehab and employment programs, and that's got special benefits and tax credits and incentives. South Carolina has several programs of their own, and your state may have some programs. Check the federal programs and your state. Veterans are a good source of employees. What's your business structure? Is it a sole proprietorship, a general partnership, an S corporation, a C corporation, or a limited liability company? Typically, no matter what the business structure is, if there are multiple owners, there's some kind of buy, sell, or shareholders agreement that imposes restrictions on any sale. Who's in control? Does your business have such an agreement? What are the terms? Is there a shotgun buy, sell? What a shotgun buy, sell is, if you're interested in selling your portion of the business and you have partners in the business or other shareholders, you have to actually offer to purchase their portion of the business, and then they have the option to purchase your portion of the business at the same rate. And so this is a situation where whoever pulls the trigger puts control in the other person's hands, and then that person can decide whether or not they want to move forward. Do you have to offer your ownership to the company or other owners? Is that in some kind of agreement? If you're a sole proprietor or a general partnership, consider forming an LLC. Now, why is that? Well, you can study this chart later, but some of the most important aspects of an LLC are the fact that you're being protected from a liability standpoint, and it's simple to form. It doesn't cost you very much. Here in Georgia, it's $100 to form it, and then $50 a year to keep it in place. There are no taxes on the LLC. It's a pass-through situation, and the members are not liable for debts, and you don't have to distribute profits in the same proportion as ownership. So you could have some members that work in the business or that bring certain talents that get a higher percentage of the profits than other members, and that's all by agreement. The problem with a sole proprietorship or a general partnership is that you have unlimited liability, okay? And if you have unlimited liability, you can also, in a partnership, be liable for the acts of other partners. So I think it's important that if you're either a sole proprietorship or general partnership, that you consider setting up an LLC. Let's look at some other factors. What's the value of the contracts that you have? Do you have a backlog? There's value in your backlog. What's the term of the contract? Are there contract limits? Do you have an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract where maybe the contract has a very high limit and a bigger firm could take advantage of that limit and do more business, and so that contract is worth more to them than it is to you? There could be real value in that. Do you have some firm commitments too? How about your client relationships? Make a list of each client, the length of the relationship, and what business you've done with that client. The same for teaming relationships. Make that list. What intangible assets do you have? Do you have any software that you've created? Do you have any unique products, services, techniques, processes? Do you have any patents? Some firms do. What about your branding? What's the awareness and perceived image in the marketplace and the industry of your brand? And do you have a reputation out there that means that your goodwill is worth something too? Are your financial statements compiled, reviewed, or audited? What's the difference between audited and unaudited financial statements? An unaudited financial statement is one that management's put together and maybe an accountant has taken a look at. But an audited financial statement means that a CPA has done some investigatory work to verify that the numbers are real. Now, it costs for an audit, and so you may not want to do that, unless you're a larger firm and maybe you want to sell to a public company. Do you have a formalized budget? Do you get monthly income statements? And do those income statements that you get compare the monthly and year-to-date results to your current budget and to last year and year-to-date? Do you track employee productivity, revenue per employee, profit per employee? You should be looking at that on a monthly basis and should be comparing that to how you did last year. Does your company have ISO or other certifications? Have you actually created a strategic plan, and how often do you update it? Have you performed a SWOT analysis? That's where you look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. How many salespeople do you have that are dedicated to business development? Do you have any? Do you have a formal marketing and sales plan? Do you have written job descriptions for your employees? Do you have documented policies and procedures for your employees to follow? And do you have a human resources professional either on staff or as a consultant? And do you have published HR policies, and do you enforce them? Do you have a set of standard contracts? Do you carefully review all new contracts before they're signed, especially if it's provided by the client? Do you or someone on your staff have a really good understanding of contracts, and do your contracts limit your liability? What types of insurance do you have, and what are the limits of each policy? Directors and officers insurance, professional liability, errors and omissions, vehicle, cyber insurance is becoming more and more important. Do you have tail coverage on a claims made basis? What if something that you did 5 years ago comes back to bite you? Do you have coverage for that? Do you have a partnership agreement, shareholders agreement, buy-sell agreement, employee confidentiality agreements, non-competition agreements? All of this comes into play when somebody is looking at performing due diligence, which we'll talk about later, in the acquisition of your firm. Do you have a working board of directors or an advisory board that includes outside members who make real contributions to your business? This is an inexpensive way to get opinions from people who know what they're doing. People maybe that have retired, have owned businesses in the past, people that have been on the buying side of the business. And they will serve and give you input for not a whole lot of money. Have you done a confidential employee satisfaction survey? Have you done a confidential client satisfaction survey? Step 3, identify the best approach and create a plan. So you need to assemble a team with ownership transition knowledge and experience to work with you and your executive staff. You need a trusted OT advisor, someone who is a specialist in mergers and acquisitions. This person would then be responsible for coordination of the process. This takes the burden off of management so you can keep running the business. This person also, because he or she is experienced, can anticipate potential conflict that might arise as a result of executing the plan. You need an attorney, and it's probably not your corporate attorney. It's one who is knowledgeable and experienced in ownership transition. And if you don't have a CPA, you need to get one. Who are you going to sell to? Well, you can sell to insiders. And an insider refers to your current employees, your current ownership's family members, and these folks are typically important to the company's success, and some of them expect to take over the business, some of them don't want to take over the business. But insiders almost never have the cash or the credit that's needed to purchase the company. So usually the company has to provide them with the cash that's needed for the purchase. Unfortunately, the taxes that are involved in this process make it financially inefficient. If you just bonus people and then they use that money to buy stock, the tax bite out of that is pretty hefty. So using an ESOP that we talked about before, that as the purchaser on behalf of the insiders, saves a bunch of taxes. This is a result of two things. First, the company receives a tax deduction for the ESOP contribution that's used to service the acquisition debt. And the insiders don't have to pay tax on the money the company contributes to the ESOP. So they're going to actually wind up one day owning the company and not having to pay for it. And you will get paid for the company, and you will pay capital gains tax. So this cost savings makes an ESOP much more financially efficient strategy than a traditional sale to insiders. And you can sell to outsiders. Sometimes a strategic acquisition by a larger company might command a higher value because you fit in with their overall strategic plan. Sometimes you might want to merge with one or more other companies before you actually sell, because 1 + 1 might equal 3. You might do a stock sale of all or a portion of your ownership, or you might do an asset sale of the business, but not the company. With any of these, as I mentioned earlier, consider teaming or working with the potential acquirer first. Let's look at payment methods. Stock swap. This is where potentially a public company, could also be a private company, gives you stock in exchange for the stock in your company. This can be a tax-free exchange. So you're actually deferring taxes if you do this kind of a stock swap. You can sell the company for cash. You can sell it on an installment sale where you spread the payments over time and also the tax liability over time. You can have an earnout as a portion of the sale, and you also may retain a minority interest in the company for some period of time so you can get a second payday in the future. You might also want ongoing compensation and benefits to be a part of the plan. Let's look at some tax considerations. If you have an S corporation and it's acquired by a C corporation, timing is critical. I've seen so many deals where people have done a deal and then afterwards not realized that what they did was break the S corporation. The conversion to a C corporation has to be done by March 15th of the year. If it's after March 15th, you actually break your S corporation, which has some dire tax consequences. Also, if you're going to transfer assets to your personal name, let's say that you get to keep your Suburban, you need to do that by the previous year end before you do the deal. That's why it's important to have advisors that can help you to avoid these pitfalls if you're actually going to be planning for ownership transition. There's that famous 338H10 election. This is where the buyer treats the stock purchase as an asset purchase. So the purchaser can actually then step up the tax basis to fair market value, and the intangibles, including goodwill, can be written off over 15 years. So they get some real benefits. But the seller has increased taxes. And so usually the seller will get a higher price because of those increased taxes. So if the buyer has put in the 338H10 election into the deal and you're not aware of this, you could get hurt because you're going to have increased taxes down the road. You need to identify the targeted industries and companies and how to attract the best suitors for purchasing your business. You need to market your company without putting up a for sale sign. Don't put a price on it, but decide what you would sell it for to the right buyer on the right terms. Set your priorities regarding the deal. Are you interested only in the highest price? What other terms of the deal really matter to you? Do you want to keep working for some period of time, and on what terms? Do you want to make sure your employees are taken care of? What about your family, your clients, your subcontractors, your suppliers, your charities? All of these I've seen rolled into deals. And will you leave some skin in the game for a second payday? And should this be an asset purchase, an all-cash deal, all stock, or a combination? Step 4, execute the plan utilizing the proper professional assistance. Now, after you define the ownership's goals, you've optimized the business and its value, you've identified the best approach and created a plan, it's time for execution. And as I always say, execute or be executed. The process. First, what's created is called a confidential information memorandum, a SIM, and then an executive summary. Then you qualify potential buyers, create a term sheet, a letter of intent, due diligence is performed, a definitive agreement is created, there's a closing, and then there are post-closing obligations. Let's start with the SIM and the executive summary. The executive summary is a short summary of the SIM that does not identify the company. This will be the potential buyer's first impression of your company. It has to be written so that a buyer gets excited and wants to know more. So they'll get this blindly. They don't know who you are. An interested potential buyer then signs a confidentiality agreement in order to receive the full SIM. And the SIM is a detailed document about your company and the opportunity. In it are the recast financial statements that are adjusted for those seller discretionary expenses. And it should be tailored to each potential buyer based on the buyer's priorities and should use terminology the specific buyer will understand. Okay, so you don't just send the same document to every potential buyer. You do your research about the potential buyer, and then you tailor the document to why they're interested in your company, how you would fit into their company. Worst case, the document should have everything a potential buyer needs to know to create a desire to know even more. The best case, it should answer all the standard questions a buyer has about the company and manage any potential objections before they're raised. Every qualified potential buyer that you talk to should want to acquire the company. Then a presentation to the potential buyer is made. This has to be polished, professional, and again, tailored. Presentation preparation is critical. It's not just a recap of the SIM. It has to clearly illustrate the commitment and capabilities of your people, especially key management. It has to show the passion that those guys showed in South Africa. It has to manage potential objections. It has to paint a post-acquisition picture for the purchaser. You have to make the potential buyer want the company and not want the competition to get it. In it, you have to define the next steps, and then comes due diligence. This is the detailed study of every aspect of your business to uncover potential liabilities and financial risks, both current and future, and virtually eliminate the unknown. Now, you can't eliminate it all, but due diligence is the place where many deals die. Managing this process is critical because things come out that you don't remember, that all of a sudden there it is in black and white. This protects both parties, but primarily the buyer. And there are several types of due diligence. There's commercial, financial, legal, and these are undertaken before investing in or acquiring a company. Then come ongoing negotiations and closing. You're constantly negotiating right up until closing. And you have to understand the techniques for optimizing these ongoing negotiations. You have to communicate regularly, especially when you have successes. So every time something good happens, you want to let the potential buyer know that it happened. You want to do a takeaway if needed. And sometimes that's appropriate, sometimes it isn't. And as you finalize the agreement, you need to check it and recheck it. Watch out for gotchas. I've seen so many deals that have had gotchas in them that were missed. It's very complex. So many things can happen. Business integration plan has to be created if you're becoming part of another company. And then you have to prepare for closing and execution of that business integration plan. You got to sweat the small stuff, like gathering the stock certificates. I remember one company that came to the table and they couldn't find the stock certificates. And so at the last minute, they had to create replacements. They had to get people to sign off saying that they had been lost or destroyed. It just slowed things down and it showed that they weren't prepared. And then after closing, you have to monitor and evaluate how well you're doing. You want to make sure that it goes well after closing. You want the buyer to be happy. Of course, you want to be happy too, but you do want the buyer and you want your former employees to be happy. Let's look at the process in you. Qualifying potential buyers and optimizing and closing the deal can take as little as a few months or as long as a few years. If it's properly managed, it can be very smooth and it can minimize the impact on you and your operations. Because you have to focus on running your company so you can achieve all the goals that you included in the SIM. You may have done some forecasting in there. A potential buyer is going to continuously monitor how you're doing and see how well you're faring versus what you told them you were going to do. Another story, the best laid plans. Once upon a time, there was a business owner named Alan who had spent many years building a successful business. He planned well for retirement, and when he was ready to enjoy it, he sold his business to David. Neither Alan nor David used an M&A professional in the deal. They just sat down with their accountants and worked it out. Then they had their corporate attorneys prepare the documents. The deal closed less than a year ago. There was a substantial down payment, and the balance was due in annual payments over 5 years. Less than a year after the closing, David called me. Do you want to guess why? That's right. He couldn't make the first payment. So he was in jeopardy of losing the business because it was actually collateral for the note. Let's look at the aftermath. The terms and what happens after a closing can be even more important than the events leading up to the closing. A few integration issues, potential culture clashes. Do the companies share common values and principles, especially as they relate to customers and employees? Even if they agree philosophically, you still have to be prepared to handle the emotional integration issues. There are going to be some situations where now there's duplication of effort in certain positions, and somebody may have to go or be demoted. Somebody's going to have to be in charge. It's important to business owners to take care of their employees. And so think about this up front and handle it up front. Also, let's not forget the legal and financial considerations. Here are just a few. Non-competition. What's the structure of ongoing payments, if any? Are these payments guaranteed? What about ongoing liabilities and indemnification? Did you make sure that tails were purchased for the insurance? We talked about tails for insurance earlier. Even after you sell the business, things could come back to bite you. And so if you buy tails for insurance, you'll be covered, even though these claims will be made years later. Just look at the screen. This was Stephen Aber, the former president of 3001, where I was the CEO. Okay, One more story. Once upon a time, there was a business owner named James. He built a nice little surveying company. Remember, these stories are true. The names have been changed in most cases. When he turned 60, he had a professional appraisal done of his business, and it valued it at $1.1 million, which made him smile. A potential buyer made an offer to buy the business, but it was below the valuation, and James was disappointed, and he just gave up. He didn't further pursue selling the business. So over the next 7 years, his aging staff dwindled as his employees retired. His client base eroded because some of his client contacts were retiring. Revenue decreased each year because James was the only real salesperson and he was slowing down. You want to guess what happened next? Yep, you're right. The business went away. What's the worst that could happen? Business liquidation. 40% of businesses are forced into liquidation because they didn't have a plan. Shutting the doors gets you almost nothing. Do you really want the business you worked so hard to build to be sold off piece by piece? Now, liquidation gets you the lowest value of your business. And you lose the investment you've made in your staff and any intangible assets like your files, your client and vendor lists, your business connections. They're virtually worthless upon liquidation. Speaking from experience, having worked with dozens of business owners over the past several decades to create and execute OT plans, planning for the eventual OT of your business will be the key to your long-term happiness and well-being. Now is the time to think, plan, and communicate with others who are stakeholders in your business. Let them know what your vision for OT is. They're thinking about it even if you aren't. They're concerned about when and how it will affect them, especially as we all get older. Should you be asking yourself these questions that relate to the rest of your life? What aspects of being a business owner do you most and least enjoy? Where do you spend your time now, and where would you like to spend it after you transition the ownership of your business to others? What passions did you have before you started your business that you may want to pursue now? 25 years ago, did you play a stand-up bass? And are you interested in going back to doing that? What do you want more of and less of in your life? Not having a transition plan can cause numerous problems for both the business and its owners. Others who are involved in the company become vulnerable, including your family, your employees, and your clients, especially if the business is heavily dependent on the owner. After your attendance at today's session, almost all of you will leave here thinking that you will create an OT plan and successfully implement it. But most of you will not create and successfully execute an OT plan. When OT occurs, most of you will get a lower valuation than you expect, or you may get absolutely nothing for all of your years of hard work. Some of you will have an OT disaster. A few of you actually will do what you need to do to make OT successful, and you will live happily ever after. Here's a quick ownership transition checklist. As you go along for each of these, you'll actually say what the status is from time to time. I'm committed to my post-ownership goals and my family is 100% behind me. I know exactly how much money I need to get out of my business after taxes and fees in order to pay for everything I want for myself, my family, and my favorite nonprofits. I know what my business is worth to my ideal acquirer. I've considered all of the OT methods and know which one is right for me. My OT advisor has examined all the value factors of my business and has prepared a plan that will optimize the value of my business. I'm working with my OT advisor to systematically implement specific value enhancement opportunities. My OT advisor works for me as my advocate, has a proven process in place to keep my plan to leave my business on track. My OT advisor has helped me assemble the right team that works together for my benefit to help me execute all the steps to ensure my successful OT. My OT advisor and I meet on a regular basis to review the progress I'm making on my personal and business plans. I'm confident that I'll be financially and mentally prepared to transfer ownership when the market is right. And I'm confident that my business will be properly positioned to transfer ownership when the market is right. You can, you should, and if you're brave enough to start, you will. Questions?
That was awesome. I love it. I've had this conversation just here internally in our own office about the amount of businesses that you can count, right, who have lasted longer than 50 years. And here, at least in Las Vegas, we can only count 2 that have probably been around for 50 plus years. All the rest of them, like you say, they just come and go. And so I don't know if George wants to talk about his situation, but same type of thing. I mean, it's just, you've seen some great companies that just go away because there's no planning involved. And so it's quite frustrating. And, I think part of what moving forward too is going to kind of all of us end up eventually merging together or working together better to kind of service our clients and service the profession for sure. Cause I think that's, we're all short staffed and we're all kind of don't have enough assets and stuff to get all the work done to service our clients and or the profession in a whole. So,
well, my comment would be, as an employee for 25 years with a company that started out with, I think I was employee number 5.
Yeah.
Ended up being the largest survey only firm in all of Nevada and Northern California. It's completely 100% gone. I left that company 10 years ago after 25 years. It's completely 100% gone, and it's a failure in management. That's all you can blame it on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a shame. It's sad. It makes me cry. I feel bad because I feel like a lot of that effort that I put forth and my fellow employees and partners put forth is down the drain.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a sad place to be.
I see it happen all the time. And I'll talk to a company who says, yeah, I'm interested in selling. And, we actually create a plan. And then it gets closer and closer to the time. And they keep saying, I want to keep working. I want to keep working. I want to keep working. There is an optimum time, which the pandemic has proven. There are some businesses that are for sale now that as little as 2 years ago were worth 5 to 10 times what they're worth today.
Yeah. James in the chat at 73, he's a sole proprietor. So it's a great timely seminar for him.
James, I'm also 73. So I understand where you are.
I love it.
Yeah.
One of the things you talked about hiring veterans, and I know Rob had put it in the chat. I don't know if you want to talk too much about it, but Rob, the helmets to hard hats stuff.
Just that's one of our points in our strategic plan at CLSA. And it's funny, when I was still working for California Department of Transportation, and we were looking to backfill some positions, I started finding the information out about how what classifications are survey related in various military occupational specialties. And my counterpart, who was my boss at the time, he and I were working this simultaneously from different directions, and he didn't know I was doing it, and I didn't know he was doing it. And we had a little meeting and said, hey, let's talk about some ideas I've got for recruitment. And he said, I've got a great one too. And turned out we were both thinking the same thing. We had both approached people in different with different connections, and so we got a chance to go to Miramar Naval Air Station, Miramar Marine Corps Air Station now, and participate in kind of a career fair for transitioning service people, and got a chance to to talk to people about land surveying as a profession, because quite a few of them weren't in the MOS. And then one fellow came up and was talking about going and doing the preliminary surveys and the construction staking for new airfields when they go out and do expeditionary force airfields and things like that. We're like, how do we get you on our team? So it was really, really great to have, a couple people working together on that. And that's one of the things I want to move forward on in the future.
Yeah, perfect.
So
I'll add 73 is a great age to be. I will be residing there for a few more months. I will also say that as a veteran, I was drafted at 19. I did a lot of growing up. And you know what? I learned about responsibility, accountability, and duty. And that has paid huge dividends to me over the course of my life. And I've got to thank the military for that. I have no one else to blame but myself and the draft. But that's my 2 cents on it.
That's
So
awesome.
now, just the fact that somebody's a vet obviously doesn't mean you're going to hire them. The key is the questions that you ask a potential candidate. And I have a whole seminar just on that. Okay, which, when you're looking for an employee, how do you make sure that that's the right person? Because it costs you a whole lot of money when you make a mistake, especially in a smaller firm. So now Jesse asked a question. He said, what do I look for when acquiring a business? Well, I talked earlier about passion. That's the first thing I look for. When I walk into a business, do the employees have a passion for what they do? I talked earlier about 3001. That passion was there. When I walked into 3001 a couple of decades ago, I saw that passion. I saw that everybody there was having a good time. And so I kept asking that question, and I still do that today. When I talk to somebody, I say, are you having a good time? Because if you're not enjoying what you do, your life is a bust. You really need to enjoy what you do. You spend more time doing this than anything else. So that's number one. Number two, obviously, is track record. And it's not just the financial aspects of it, but it's also what have they actually done? What have they been able to perform? What has the management team done together? And how much of the management team will stay intact? So it really relates to the people more than anything else. Then you look at all the other things that I mentioned that add to the value of the company. But it is the people. At the end of the day, that's what really matters. Does that answer your question, Jesse?
Yeah. You want to add on to that, Jesse? Did you have more than that?
First of all, Charles, thank you for taking the time out to speak to all of us today.
My pleasure.
I was just going to weigh in on the hard hats to helmets. I think being a military veteran, I don't think I would be where I'm at today if it wasn't for, being a part of the Navy Seabees. So, Rob, I'd love to reach out and talk to you about the program that you're trying to start up, and maybe if there's a way we can team and attack the entire West Coast. I'm right up north in Portland, Oregon, so I would love to be able to, get that going up here as well.
That's cool.
Great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I don't know, Charles, you mentioned your other stuff about hiring employees. I think that would be something beneficial too. Maybe we could look at doing another presentation on that kind of stuff. Because, all of this business stuff, I think is what a lot of surveyors and surveying companies need. And so I just think that would be another great presentation that we could do.
I mean, this is what I do every day.
I know.
I work with my clients and help them to get to where they need to get to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's really rewarding, especially I'm at this point in my life where I only have to deal with people I want to deal with.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love it.
So Charles, guess what?
What?
Passion shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that,
Thanks.
George. Yeah.
Atta way, George.
Yeah. Jen, do you have questions? because you actually got your camera on, so I'm assuming you have a question. You never have it on.
I know. Well, it's usually supper time during this.
I know.
So I'd like to kind of pose something to the group, and this is like half a thought, so bear with me while I try to put it together. So I'm new, those of you who don't know me. I'm a student still, so kind of new to the surveying thing, and starting to do interviews, and this, like, the concept that I might at some point be in someone's pipeline for taking over is kind of a new idea for me. And like, how do you guys all feel about that? Because I'm kind of dealing with it on an emotional level right now, and not like a strategy kind of level. It's a little bit like, oh, this is weird. I haven't quite figured out what I think about it yet. Just like what I'm feeling. So what is? Does anyone have any input on what your thoughts are on sort of like?
In most cases, from my experience personally, when you sell a business, you're selling your staff and their ability to relate to the clients that you have on board and go out and get new clients. And if you don't have a staff that goes along with your business, you really don't have a whole heck of a lot to sell.
That's right. Again, it comes down to people. That's what it's about.
And I would say, from my standpoint, Jen, I would just, it's baby steps, right? And I know you're still just kind of finishing up college or getting ready to get into the workforce. So it's going to be baby steps, and it's believe it or not, it's a 25-year plan, really, right? And so it's the stuff that will grow on you as you go through your career and every step along the way. And so as overwhelming as it is today, it won't be overwhelming in 25 years. I can tell you that. So
what's even more important than the questions that are asked of you in an interview are the questions that you ask.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll agree with that for sure.
Yeah, you should make sure that you pick the right company and the right position.
Like it talks about company culture, right? And stuff like that.
Right.
So here for us, I mean, we do tons of outings, employee outings, family outings, right? Baseball games, or, obviously pre-COVID, but baseball games and different, Dave and Buster type family affairs and, movie theater type stuff. So you want the company culture that's going to match you personally.
Yep.
Exactly. That was my experience with my company. I mean, we started out and we worked hard. We worked 70-hour weeks all the time, but we played just as hard and we had just as much fun after hours, if there were any, as we did working. And, it was, we all held each other accountable and pushed each other to do more and better. And well, I'll tell you what, you get big dividends when you do that.
Exactly.
Now, I'm lucky in that I have some people that have worked with me for over 40 years that go from business to business as I get involved in different things. And so we have that mutual respect and trust, and I know I can count on them. And so, if I get involved with a company that needs a particular kind of person, I can reach into my past to grab somebody and plug them into that situation. It's great to do that. We have a couple of questions on attorneys, CPAs, and other professionals. In terms of who should be on the staff, obviously, when you put together a team, you want to have a CPA, and if your CPA is knowledgeable in doing deals and not just, a CPA that does taxes, then that person would be on the team. But if not, you might want to look for a CPA that's done deals, that's been involved in mergers and acquisitions. The same for the attorney. Most corporate attorneys have not done that. They're more involved in the day-to-day corporate affairs, and they're not involved in mergers and acquisitions. So you want somebody who has that experience, and then you want someone who can manage the process. And I do that for my clients. Okay, I manage the process. I'm doing that right now. We just executed a letter of intent last week to acquire a company, and now I will manage the due diligence process, finish the negotiations, and help with the combination of the companies, and then moving forward, actually help to manage the companies going forward. So you want someone, and if you're interested in talking to me, I'm happy to do that, but you may know somebody who does what I do, or you may know of somebody local to you, but I do work, across the country and even in Europe.
Awesome.
So it's a big effort. It takes a lot of work, and I only do one or two at a time. Okay.
Good information. I know Zach had his hand up. Go for it, Zach.
Okay, had to get on the unmute. I had a question earlier. You had talked about like transferring the SDE to like an individually owned LLC.
Correct.
If we are a licensed business, would you be able to use an incorporated business as a single entity legally, or would that need to be a sole person?
Okay, the LLC can have, a name. It doesn't have to be you.
Okay.
So I actually have several LLCs that I've set up for various things. I'm the sole owner of some of them. In some of them, I have as many as 9 other individuals involved in ownership of the LLC.
Okay.
So it's just like setting up any other corporation. The only difference is you're not double taxed. Okay. It's
okay.
like
So that's the benefit of that.
The real benefit is that it's totally passed through. And then all you do is you file an information return at the end of the year that shows how much you distributed to each owner. And you send an owner a K-1 that shows their portion, what they got out of the company for the year, and they pay taxes on that, as though it's ordinary income. But the business pays no taxes. The business does not file a tax return, and all the owners are protected from liability. It's a wonderful thing in LLC. And it's the newest form of ownership.
So that wouldn't apply at all to like an incorporated business being its own legal entity, I guess.
Yeah, it is its own legal entity. It'll have an FEIN number, okay? However, it can own a corporation. So like, let's say that you have a corporation already, okay? And you're doing business as that corporation, no problem. But you have an LLC that you own that owns the business or a portion of the business and charges that business a management fee for your time. So, and maybe it's kind of a split situation. Maybe you're an employee of the business, the corporation, and you get paid normal wages there. And then you get paid extra in terms of management fees that get paid to the LLC. And as I say, the reason for doing that is multiple reasons. One, taxation, but also from the standpoint that when you go to sell the business, the financial statements of the business itself, the corporation, are very accurate and they're real. They don't have your Maserati in them. That's the LLC.
Right. Okay. Great presentation. Loved it. Thank you.
I know it's a lot of information. If you think of anything else, you've got my contact information. I'm happy to help any way I can.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
It's awesome. Good question, Zach.
Yeah.
Anybody else got anything they want to add? Adam, I know you just kind of joined, but we're just kind of wrapping up, and you can always go back and catch up on the video. So
yeah, I was a little late to the party this time. Just trying to jump in, and
all good.
I'll go check it out.
Yeah, no, it's good. It was good stuff. Anybody else questions want to add? I know there's a few of you looking to start businesses. Anybody got questions that they want to ask him on that side of things?
That's critical, how you actually set it up in the beginning.
Yeah.
I've seen so many people just set up a C corporation, then all of a sudden realize, wait a minute, I'm going to be double taxed.
Exactly. Let's,
So,
yeah, go for it.
and, you know, we talked a lot about trusts. You really need to do some trusts. It's a great way to shelter your assets for your estate and also to avoid taxes. And it's legitimate.